Hi there. So, I'm making a video for the first time in like a year or something to talk to you about a very interesting topic. Universalism! Yay! Basically, universalism, at least in terms of public policy, is the idea that social welfare programs shouldn't always be targeted at specific communities, but should instead be offered for all. You've probably heard of policy proposals like universal basic income or Medicare for all. These would be universal policies, while something like Social Security would be a targeted policy, specifically targeted at the elderly and disabled. But you may be asking, Max, you handsome devil, wouldn't those policies be more expensive than the private alternatives? And why should we pay for rich people's services when they can afford the private version? Well, first of all, thanks. You think I'm handsome? Yeah, is it the hat? I really like the hat. SJ actually picked it out for me. It's nice, isn't it? But second, those are very good questions, and I'll be sure to answer those and more. So without further ado, SJ and I present... Sorry, you okay, buddy? Okay, so I'd like to start by saying, of course, there are instances when target policies make more sense. I brought up Social Security, for instance, earlier, and I do believe Social Security should exist. In fact, let's focus on Social Security and specifically its retirement benefits for a moment. The elderly are some of our most vulnerable citizens. It's harder for them to do pretty much everything. So they should get additional assistance from our government so that they can retire at a reasonable age and just vibe or whatever it is old people do. Plus, it's relatively easy to check if someone's eligible for Social Security. If you're 62 or older, you qualify for some money. However, we should be striving to make most policies as universal as possible. And here's why. You see, the first problem with many targeted policies is that depending on their target population, they may become stigmatized. Social Security targets the elderly and disabled, and we generally don't think too poorly of them. Except SJ, he's a little ageist. But what about policies which target the poor, or criminals, or immigrants? You see, there are two factors to think about when considering policies and their target populations. One, their social construction, or how society generally perceives them, and two, their political power. I'll throw up a graph or something so that you can visualize it. So when we think about welfare, at least in the US, we often think about the poor and associate them with laziness and drug addiction, and we conceptualize welfare as this thing which allows these parasites to leech off the government instead of providing for themselves. Which I will definitely flag is not my personal opinion, I'm just projecting here. But this can make it tough to pass new legislation which targets low-income people, and it can make many people who would otherwise qualify for these programs to abstain, either out of some sense of pride or because they just have a lack of information. And so, these programs often have smaller scopes than they really should have. Take Medicaid, for example. It provides healthcare for the lowest income Americans, and the eligibility requirements are based on income. In most states, people making under $17,774 annually are eligible, which is about 19% of the population. And yet, only 17.8% is actually on Medicaid. Now, that's only a gap of about 1%, which doesn't sound like a lot, but we live in a country of 330 million people. That's 3.3 million people who qualify for Medicaid but are not getting it. And we're completely ignoring the people who really should be getting Medicaid but like just are above the line, you know? Now, I don't have any actual data about why there are so many people who qualify for Medicaid but aren't taking advantage of it, so I'll flag this as conjecture. But it seems reasonable to assume at least some of those 3.3 million are not signed up either out of some pride because they don't want to admit to themselves that they're poor, or because they just don't know they're actually eligible. The stigma hurts the program. It's very difficult to pass new legislation to help the people who should qualify for Medicaid but who don't, and even the people who are eligible won't all sign up. Of course, Medicare for all wouldn't have this kind of stigma. It doesn't target the poor, or as some politicians would call them, the lazy. It doesn't require signing up for a program that many people wouldn't be willing to join. Medicare for all would just be a human right, guaranteed to all people no matter how society sees them. You could just show up to a hospital and know, without having to sign up for anything, that you will get the care you need. But Medicare for all is expensive, you might be saying. How on earth are we going to get the bajillion dollars to pay for it? What, do you want to tax the rich just because you're more lazy than them? Are you serious? What the Okay, calm down. Medicare for All, like many universal programs, isn't as expensive as people think. In 2020, the Congressional Budget Office released a report reviewing 5 different versions of a single-payer healthcare system like Medicare for All. And funny enough, they found that in the worst case, it would cost an additional $290 billion, which, by the way, is only like 40% of our military budget and nowhere close to the bajillion dollars you were talking about before, you dum-dum. In the best case, it could save $650 billion. Now, the details of the report are, sadly enough, incredibly boring. I know, just an incredibly dull read. So I won't bore you with the details, but the general idea is that without private insurance, without the middlemen who just profit enormously off of human suffering and pain, we'd actually save on overhead. And Medicare for All would end up being very affordable. Of course, that may not matter to you. You may just think that the rich and powerful don't deserve the same government help as low-income individuals, and I wouldn't fault you for thinking that. After all, the rich are usually thought about pretty negatively. They're up in that top right corner of the chart I showed you before. And yeah, why should your tax dollars pay for a trust fund baby's education or their medical treatment? Why should people making billions of dollars a year get access to a UBI that doesn't make any difference for them? Well, first of all, don't worry, there aren't a lot of multi-billionaires and trust fund babies out there, so it's not like you're paying that much more to include them. And besides, why should that even matter? Listen, I'd love to eat the rich as much as the next guy, seriously. But universal healthcare and universal housing and universal public education, those things aren't about helping those in need. It's about guaranteeing all people certain fundamental human rights. Healthcare shouldn't be a commodity to be bought and sold. It should just be as simple as walking into the hospital and asking for help. That's it. And anyway, billionaires are paying taxes too, and they're not paying anywhere close to their fair share, but still. So I guess what it comes down to is this. In certain instances, it makes sense to provide specific targeted additional assistance to certain populations. But so often, we design policies to be targeted out of some misplaced belief that it'll make it cheaper or that we shouldn't be paying for the rich, when those policies really should be universal. So I guess what I'm saying is I support things like universal basic income and free healthcare and free public college and all things that will never get passed because Joe Manchin is a fucking demon. But one day I hope to live in a world where healthcare, housing, education, food are all universal rights. So yeah, I hope you've learned something today. No, I haven't. I already knew all of this. That's why I'm making this video actually. But yeah, I guess be sure to like and subscribe.